Sambatskana Mongolia, and welcome to the MNC Network for Alison Zochin. Today I have the Australian Ambassador to Mongolia, Ambassador John Langtree. Ambassador, how are you? It's good to see you.
Very well. Sambano.
And I want to say to you, Sachen Haurchino, which is happy spring. Welcome today.
Well, I'm having a very happy spring.
I'm so glad you're just back from Hong Kong, where you competed in a sailing regatta, a quick getaway from UB?
Well, there's so many things to do, so many good ideas that I don't get a lot of holidays. Yes, I did have a week away.
I'm glad.
And I did enjoy catching up with my old friends in Hong Kong, because I was actually serving in Hong Kong in the 1990s.
Oh, I didn't know that. Hey, John, where did you grow up in Australia, and what made you choose a career in diplomacy?
Yes, well, my standard joke about, or answer to the question is, I don't really have a home because my father was in the army, so we moved around an awful lot. I guess what made me interested in diplomacy as much as anything else was my father, who was a soldier, fought in the Second World War, but always wanted his children to contribute to public life and a better society.
Right, very good. And now listen, that's certainly what you're doing in Mongolia. You're involved in so many programs here, which I will get to. But I first want to start off with a very simple question. How do you enjoy living in Mongolia?
Well, how lucky can you be? This is a wonderful country. I like the fact that there are wide open spaces, there's blue skies. I like the way there are 4 clear seasons. The only thing, I guess, that I wouldn't like about the environment, I guess, is the same as everybody else in Ulaanbaatar. I just wish there was less water.
Yeah. It's hard in the winter, isn't it?
It's hard in the winter.
Yeah.
Well, I just remember for the demonstrations out in the square, what is it they say? Borj Ukler?
Shocking, yeah.
It's shocking, and it's not getting better. The other thing that is fantastic about serving in this country is the people.
Yeah, the people.
Just so warm-hearted, and particularly they know and like Australia, partly because there's a lot of interest in the education system, but also they just see so much in common, as I see so much in common.
John, Ambassador Langtree, I must also say you do have some wonderful Mongolian staff at the embassy, so you're very, very lucky indeed. Ambassador, I'd like to know just quickly again, where have you traveled to in Mongolia, and if you could pick one of your most favorite locations, where would it be?
Well, I've gone to over half of the provinces in Mongolia so far, and it's my ambition to go to all of them before I finish my posting. As for which is my favorite, well, that's a fairly dangerous thing to venture into, because all of the provinces I've visited, all of the governors have wanted me to like their province the best. My first visit, though, was to Hovd.
Oh, wow, I've been to Hovd. Hovd is magical.
Yeah, and I have a wonderful memory, or at least a wonderful travel memory there, because we went to dinner with a herder family in a gir. He had, I suppose, 200 or 300 goats and sheep, and we had, I think, goat for dinner with rice, which was very nice. So we had a wonderful discussion about the sheep industry in Australia and the sheep industry here, and how different they were. Because my father, after he retired from, he had a sheep farm.
Whereabouts in Australia was the sheep farm?
It's near Canberra, some of the best sheep wool country in Australia. And so, yeah. And the one thing this herder could not believe was our sheep meat industry, because it's based on lamb, yearling lamb. He said, "What? You slaughter them at only 1 year? Just think how much bigger they'd be if you waited another year." Just so cruel.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, well, that's a big difference.
Yeah, a huge difference. And you have to live here for a while to know that. I mean, they do grow and they fatten the sheep, and there's no baby lamb chops here, and I see why they do it now.
Yep.
It's a good idea. Gosh, and listen, how have you enjoyed your nadams and your tsagansars? Do you partake in these festivals in Mongolia?
Well, I enjoy all the same things Mongolians do. I guess with Naadam, there's the horse racing, there's the Bukh, and of course there's Nadmin Hoshur.
Yes, the best.
That's right.
I must say to you, I don't think I told you this. I was at the Bituni Bukh evening, the night before Sagan Sar, and you were way down in front of me, and I tried to grab your attention. You were with Jim Anderson from the World Bank, and with the President and the Prime Minister and the Speaker, and I was way up the back. But the nice thing about that stadium is everywhere is a good view. Do you enjoy watching the Bukh?
I do. Yeah. And actually, the Prime Minister and others are there, but it's not actually an occasion for the ambassadors to go and talk to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is allowed to enjoy the wrestling.
Yes.
But what's really fun is we get to go down and talk to the Lama.
Oh, right.
So the Lama is our host on the day.
But how nice.
And so we have all the ambassadors go down, some of us dressed in our del, some of us not, and he explains about Mongolian Buddhism and their traditions.
Wow.
And he has a great sense of humour.
Yep.
And he really tests his poor young interpreter as well.
You're very lucky. I envied you that evening. Listen, we'll move on to the activities of the Australian Embassy here, but can you give me a rough idea how many Australians are living and working in Mongolia, and is it predominantly in mining?
Well, it is predominantly in mining, but that's not all. I guess it's a bit hard to count because particularly with the Oyu Tolgoi project stage 2 ramping up, we've got a lot of people coming and going.
Right.
I would say there's at least 500.
At least 500.
At least 500. And in addition to the people involved in mining equipment, technology, services and exploration, we've also got a lot of people here as volunteers and also teachers and the like.
Mm-hmm. Right. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the activities that the Australian Embassy is involved in? I know there are so many of them, but perhaps a couple of the most important things that the Australian Embassy does here and how it assists Mongolians.
Well, as your audience would probably know, we're a very new embassy. We've had diplomatic relations with Mongolia for 46 years. The embassy was only established in December 2015. We, of course, had ambassadors in places like Seoul, Beijing and Moscow covering Mongolia in the past. But now that we're here with a full embassy, we're able to concentrate all the time, every day, on developing new opportunities to build the relationship. And that's been terrific fun.
Yeah.
Of course, we are continuing to work very hard on our traditional strengths here, so there's the education relationship, and of course the Australia Awards, our postgraduate scholarships that we've been running since 1994.
Right.
But there's also, in addition to that, we have got our interest in supporting good quality investment in mining projects, mining exploration and mining development in Mongolia, to contribute to your development and to contribute to your economic sovereignty.
Exactly. Right. Listen, I noticed, well, there's also a direct aid program, and you yourself are involved in a lot of unique works around the country. I saw a photo of you in Hofskol a few weeks ago. You were attending a center where Australian surgeons and Mongolian surgeons were working together. Was it for surgery to help children who are born with facial deformities?
It was indeed. But, what I'd like to explain is some of the new things that we're actually doing in the relationship as an embassy. Is one of them is we're working quite hard on public health, and particularly the health, safety and empowerment of women and women, children and young people.
Yes.
And a lot of this doesn't come directly out of the bilateral aid program at all. Yes, we do have the DAP program, that's direct assistance program, which is a small grants program, but we have money that also comes in directly through regional programs, and it's funding out of Canberra for NGOs, which very active in areas like public health. Right. And the Hoof School project is one where Australian doctors have volunteered for many years to come to Mongolia to work, first of all, on introducing modern anaesthetic practice, but also developed from there to treatment of trauma, and particularly treatment of the very many children who get very badly burnt.
Right.
And through scalds and through burns off the stoves at the gutters. And that has been inspiring.
Yeah.
What we've been supporting in Hoof School is the teaching of reconstructive surgery, so that children whose hands have been fused together and very badly burnt can be made functional again. And it's just tremendously exciting to see now that after several years cooperation with some support from the embassy directly and indirectly through Australian aid, that the hospital now has a surgeon, a Mongolian surgeon, who can do this.
Wow. It must be a life-changing experience for the Australian surgeons who come here and work with the surgeons and the doctors in Hoof School, just to see and be involved in a program like that.
I think Australians who come to Mongolia see so many opportunities to do good things based on our shared experience that they just find it impossible to leave. Yes. So they always come back.
Yeah.
And I think particularly in things like, Australia and Mongolia, we both have sparse populations and all the problems of that you find with remote communities, and medicine's one of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, yes, they'll come here and they'll say, oh, we have such experience in this area we could share, we have to come back.
Yeah.
And I think certainly if you look at anaesthesia, trauma, burn surgery, and a number of other areas, that there was already a really good basis for me to build on when I came here as ambassador. I'm just able to bring a few more partners into it and get a bit more priority to some of the programs.
Wonderful job, wonderful job. A lot of people say so. And listen, touching briefly before on the Mongolian Gender Equality Center for combating gender-based violence. You were involved in that, and that was a very successful initiative, training members of the health profession and police. Tell me a bit about that.
This is part of the very important work we do in making sure that women and children are empowered. And yes, we have a volunteer program as well as our small grant program. And we have worked with the National Centre Against Violence, in particular on domestic violence shelters and the like over the years, both in Ulaanbaatar and also in Urhange.
Right.
So that's one aspect. But there are a number of other things that we are doing in the medical sector. One in particular I'm really excited about, and this is new, is a public-private partnership with Oyu-Tolgoi and with the Umnagov and Handbog governments and the national government, and a wonderful, wonderful Naomi Kitahara in UNFPA to bring in an IMAG-wide comprehensive health program focusing on the health of women, young people, and also victims of trauma. And what's really interesting about this is it's the first time that a number of UN agencies have combined together. UNFPA took the lead, but also WHO and UNICEF, and of course UNDP supporting in the background to actually have a comprehensive look at how you could address an IMAG-wide health system and make all of the bits work together.
Oh gosh.
But the other thing, it also involves a number of NGOs, including burns and trauma and anaesthetic surgeons, also their Mongolian counterparts. What is going to be interesting about it is we're going to have an initial focus on the Intersum Hospital in Handbog to really see if we can bring some of the important lessons that Australia's learnt about remote area emergency medicine into play, so that the hospital is much better able to deal not only with problems with taking care of herder families in very remote locations, but also to deal with the unexpected but very high rate of traffic accidents due to the coal trucks.
Oh, gosh, of course.
And so this is a multi-year program. At this stage it's worth about $5 million, but what's exciting is that you've seen Oya Tolgoi through their community development fund, UN system, Australian embassy and government, and also a number of NGOs come together and said, let's make this work. Let's show best practice. Particularly important in Umnagov, because at the moment, although it is one of the biggest contributors to Mongolia's national income through the mining investment down there, has amongst the worst public health statistics in Mongolia.
Gosh. Well, let's hope that changes soon with this amazing initiative. I wish this group of entities a huge success.
The other ones are my favourites. I think you've heard about the HPV vaccination.
Yes, of course.
Because Mongolia has a terrible problem with cancer of the cervix here. It's amongst the worst. The incidence is amongst the worst in Asia. And of course, this is a disease that we know from Australia's experience is preventable.
Yes, exactly.
It's preventable through vaccination. Australian scientists invented the vaccine. We know that it's safe, and we have the most advanced vaccination campaign in the world. And we will probably be the first country in the world effectively to eliminate cancer of the cervix.
Wow, let's hope so. You know, I have spoken to many doctors in the past about cervical cancer, and there's a little bit of a suspicion about foreign pharmaceutical companies, but they don't realize that much of this vaccinating work is through charity and for free to prevent this disease, and that it is such a killer of women, particularly as they approach their 50s and 60s. So very important. I know a lot about this through my father, who was great friends with Ian Fraser, who discovered the vaccine.
Yes, that's right. Well, I want to give a lot of credit to the Health Minister, Sarah Gerald. She has taken the issue up very positively, and although the program, the vaccination program is yet to get underway, it's certainly now clearly in the plan. For in the national vaccination program. And the other thing is, of course, the UN has recognised that Mongolia has a particular problem with cancer of the cervix, and they have made Mongolia one of 6 countries in the world to have a campaign to deal with to eliminate cervical cancer, and this includes the vaccination.
How wonderful! Bravo to the minister.
Yes.
That's good for embracing this.
And also bravo to the WHO, the UN system, and all of the people who are supporting this.
Yep.
I'll tell you what, I've also spoken to every single one of the members of, women members of Parliament, and they're behind it too.
Good.
So I'm confident that Mongolia will be able to share the benefits that we've had in Australia from this wonderful, safe vaccine.
Brilliant. I want people to get behind this too. Yeah. That's wonderful news. Let's talk about something a little bit of let's go downturn. A lot of my Mongolian friends will ask me, Alison, I've tried to get a visa to go to Australia. Why is it so tricky to get a visa? I keep getting knocked back. Can you answer this question? I know there are application forms one has to go through, but why perhaps might it be difficult for some applicants to get to Australia?
Well, I think this is probably a question you ask every ambassador who appears on your program. And no one likes having to go and get a visa, but we have a universal visa system. And the good news for Mongolians is actually Australia invented the paperless visa back in the 90s. And so we don't take your passport away from you. You can apply online. The advice I'd give to Mongolians who want to make sure that they have the best chance of getting their visa approved is, yes, we require a lot of documentation, financial recommendation, records and things like that. Don't cut any corners. You've got a very good chance of getting a visa if you provide in an open and free way all the information they're seeking. Because we want Mongolians to go to Australia. You know, not least the students, but also you know, their families want to go and visit them, and also there's an increasing business interest. And so,
I like
we
that.
have a good
Don't
system.
cut the corners.
Don't cut corners. A lot of the things I see come across my desk, you know, people running around at the last moment that, oh, how are we going to get bank records? And they just don't submit them.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Or worse still, I'll produce a photocopy of something that could be theirs, but maybe not. Things like that.
Yes.
And I don't think they necessarily sort of are trying to fool anybody with it. They just, can't we just get this done simply and quickly?
Yep.
Well, in this sort of case with visas, don't cut corners.
Yeah.
It's you have a much better chance if you give the visa people what they ask for. The other thing is we don't do visas out of the embassy.
In UB you don't?
No, we don't.
Okay.
You can do it online. There is also an Australian Visa Centre. They're a service provider who can help you do the applications, provide advice on it. But we don't issue visas out of any Australian embassy anywhere in the world these days.
Right.
It's basically an online process.
Okay.
And we don't put a stamp in your passport.
Wonderful. Very, very advanced.
Yeah.
Very professional.
It's good. Well, what happens is when you go to check in, the information about your visa is on the airline clerk's display.
Oh, right.
So it's an electronic authority.
Wow.
And the person who's checking you in doesn't have to look at a stamp because they have the information there together with your booking.
Right.
So that was the breakthrough.
And
it's a good system. So if you want to go to Australia or one or two other countries, you know how it is. If someone takes your passport, they sit in it for 3 weeks. It's quite difficult for you to plan. Well, we don't do that. So we're much more friendly.
Yeah, I like that. Okay. Thank you, Ambassador Langtry, for that concise answer. And anybody who keeps asking me why can I get the visa, you've heard it there. Yep. Or perhaps it can be more easily achieved by just going through the simple, correct process.
And there is one other thing, a piece of good news. It isn't finished yet, but we are negotiating what's called a work and holiday arrangement with Mongolia. It's a reciprocal arrangement so that young Mongolians can go to Australia. They can work part-time while they're enjoying a holiday, maybe looking at educational opportunities. And we want young Australians also to come to Mongolia and do the same thing. So we're hoping that the Australian and Mongolian governments can get this agreement finalised as soon as possible.
Great initiative. Ambassador Langtry, I want to ask you, we're going to take another turn. I wouldn't be doing this interview justice if I did not ask you about Mohamed Monshi, the Australian citizen who's been imprisoned here for 7 years. Without going into the details of the case, could you just provide me with a comment or two about his situation and how the embassy feels about it?
Well, I need to be a bit careful about what I say here. Of course, first and foremost, Australia respects Mongolia's judicial sovereignty, and so I'm certainly not going to be talking about the verdict itself. But and the second thing is also in Australia we have very strong privacy laws, so there's very little I can say personally about Mr. Munshi's situation. But it is a matter of the public record that this Australian-British businessman has exhausted his appeals against criminal prosecution in a case that started off as a commercial dispute between a Mongolian and Australian company. And I think what I'd like to say is that for any country that wants to attract good quality foreign investors, and that country should, and the country's government should make it clear that it is the view of the government that the first and the best option for resolving commercial disputes between indigenous companies and foreign investors should be international standard commercial arbitration. Right. Mongolia has been a signatory to the New York Convention, which is the UN Convention basically on the recognition and enforcement of arbitral awards since 1994, believe it or not. So very early signatory. Yeah. And my suggestion really is do not allow commercial disputes to be unreasonably dragged into the criminal justice system, because it does terrible things to your reputation as an attractive investment destination. It will scare away the very good quality investors that Mongolia so desperately needs to develop its economy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Ambassador Langtry, could you also tell me about some of the challenges that the Mongolian government faces?
I think the Mongolian government is facing the same sort of development challenges that Australia has faced in the past, with trying to build an internationally competitive mining sector. And Australia, like Mongolia, doesn't have sufficient capital at home to invest in major mining projects. In fact, the government does not invest in mining projects at all. And in fact, we have over the years also got out of the business of having state-owned enterprises. So what happens in our system is, where I think we've been successful, and there may be some useful experience we can share with Mongolia, is by developing internationally competitive regulatory and taxation approach to mining exploration in particular, but also mining development.
Right.
And I think what we have done well is that we've managed over the years generally to be consistent, clear, and well coordinated in our policies and our laws. And that's not only consistent and clear for the term of one government, but over the term of multiple governments. And what we know is that mining and minerals exploration in particular is a very risky business, but also mining as well, because you have to deal with international prices which go up and down. And so our approach has been for governments to invest in the infrastructure that's needed to support the mining industry and mining development, but we don't go out and invest it in ourselves.
Right.
I think this is, whilst it's Mongolia's sovereign right to want to own shares of its own resources and mines, there are other ways of doing it that are just as effective in developing a really good contribution to your national development. I think we have the Australia-Mongolia Extractives Program. We are already sharing a lot of our experience with Mongolia through that, and also helping to build things like a new geoscience authority. What I would say from our own experience, where we have got it wrong on things like taxation, is, for goodness sake, whatever you do, don't strangle your exploration pipeline, because if you don't go out and get private investors, foreign investors, to take the big risks that are involved in exploration, you won't have world-class mines, and world-class mines are what you build a world-class economy on. So I think in Mongolia, I mean, everyone always asks me about, they say to me, oh, you guys are the same as us, you know, Australia, you know, your economy is all about mining and agriculture. Well, what people don't realise is that mining and agriculture were the things that allowed us to build an economy. Right. But if you look at it in GDP terms, mining is about 9% of GDP, only 9%, and agriculture is less than 3%, it's nearly exports themselves are only 4% of GDP overall, and 60% is in the services sector. And that's where developed countries need to go. And what we would suggest is that we've had a good experience with using things like minerals exploration and development to diversify our economy, and that's what Mongolia should aim at as well. And having a good pipeline to keep the projects going is very important in smoothing the bumps out of the commodity cycle and making sure that you can sustainably develop your national economy.
Thank you for that comment. Listen, what does the future hold in terms of Mongolian-Australian diplomatic relations?
Oh, I'm very confident about that. I mean, we've got so much in common. And also, we've got so many people in the Mongolian government who know us well, and have high expectations of doing bigger and better things. Just to give you one example, I mean, everyone knows about the Australia Awards.
Oh, yes.
This is the postgraduate scholarships that we've been offering since 1994. Well, we've got approaching 450 alumni now.
Wow. It's a club.
And yeah, well, they call themselves the Mongolian Australian Association, or the Mozzies.
That's great. And
for those of you who don't know Australia well, a Mozzie is also Australian slang for mosquito. So it means So any Australian who hears the Mozzies describing themselves as the Mozzies is immediately impressed, not only with the real support and liking of Australia that these wonderful people, Mongolians, bring to the relationship, but also the fact that they have a similar sense of humour.
Yes. You know what, you're not wrong. I agree with you there. And it's not an easy humour to get. It's a very dry, witty humour.
But there are 3 members of the cabinet at the moment who are Mozzies.
At
least 3. Tsog Batar, Foreign Minister, Hurul Batar is the Finance Minister, and the Defence Minister, Inkbold, Nyamagi and Inkbold.
Wow, there you go.
And there may be a few others who also identify as Mozzies, but haven't...
they just maybe come to the parties.
Haven't really made a big thing about it in public.
Funny.
So, we're very well served with that. But also the range of things we do together, not only just bilaterally, but also internationally, can only grow. You know, things like people don't know a lot about, like UN, United Nations peacekeeping. Australia and Mongolia work very closely together on that. And we're also both members of the Human Rights Commission at the moment in Geneva. And obviously it's good to have 2 strong democracies in there trying to make sure that the norms are not unreasonably changed.
Oh, thank you for that answer. And let's hope the good relations continue. I have no doubt that they will. Okay, my last question to finish off on, what's the best thing about being the Australian ambassador in Mongolia for you?
The best thing about being Australian ambassador is that this is a country that really sees a future for our relations with Australia. And so there's a real genuine warmth to everything you do. And yes, we can and will disagree from time to time. And yes, I will be critical of where I think that not only Australia's interest, commercial or otherwise, but also our interest in Mongolia's development, which is very important to us. Because, you know, fellow democracies has got to stick together.
Yes.
And we certainly realise that the difficulties that a landlocked country like Mongolia has also participating in the international trade. So we will be critical, but that's because we know that our criticism will be understood as something that is intended to be constructive and positive. And I think looking around the other countries I've served in the region, I don't want to sound negative about it, but I spent most of my time in this part of the world, Japan, China. I've worked on Taiwan and Hong Kong, Macau, Korea. This is the country I've worked in which I feel has brought the most enriching professional experience to me, because there's so much positive you can do, and we do not get easily bogged down in the negative.
Thank you. I think Mongolians will really appreciate that answer, and I certainly thank you for your time today. I know Mongolians will find this interview fascinating. Ambassador Langtry, thank you very, very much for your time today. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you. And that's all today, viewers, on Alison Zochin. I hope to see you next week on the MNC Network. But for now, Sakhanam Rade.